Today we're going to talk about how to put together the finance for the starting of a business. On Quora, I've recently seen a post where somebody was asking, how do you start a business with no money? I think that question assumes that it's actually possible. So let's change that question a little bit. Is it possible to start a business with no money down? And the answer has to be a resounding no. So that then leads on to the next question. How much do you need to start a business? Well, of course, different businesses have different setup costs, have different running costs, and have different profit margins. If you look at a car dealership, for example, if you're selling cars, then you're looking at a profit margin of about 10%. If, however, you're selling jewelry, you're looking at about 200%. And if you're looking at an average, and of course we have one extreme to the next, so the average is perhaps not that useful. You really have to look at your own specific business that you're interested in. But for an average, let's say the average is 30%. Well, if we're going to work out based on 30% how much you need to invest in your business, then whatever you do has to make more money than you would make working for somebody else. Otherwise, why would you do it? Why would you open a business to earn less money than you can earn working for somebody else and not actually having to hold all of the risk? Well, obviously different people, again, earn different amounts. So let's have a look at the average. I had a look on Google this morning what the average salary is in the UK, and it said about 27,000. Now, of course, you're going to have a very large number of people earning less than the top 1%, but the average, for the benefit of this video, is £27,000. Let's say £30,000. $40,000. So the average salary is $40,000. Well, if you've got a business that is making, on average, 30%, then we need to work out what the salary would be per month. Okay, I'm not going to bother doing this with a calculator, but let's say $40,000 would equate to about $3,500. So we know we need to make at least $3,500, and if your profit margin is 30%, then that would make, if $3,500 was 30%, that would mean that you would need to sell about $11,500 worth of whatever it is you sell in order to make the $3,500. So if you take your $11,500 and you minus $3,500, you end up with about $8,000 worth of stock. So let's just pretend the setup costs were zero. Let's just pretend that you didn't have to spend money on marketing. So based on these calculations then, we know that we should be making about 50%. After we've covered all of our costs, we walk away with 30%. And so you've now got 30% in your hand, which is $3,500. Congratulations, you are now walking away with the average salary for the UK. And if you're earning less than that now, then you will be earning more money. Now, the only problem with this is this. You will forever have the same salary because you're taking the money out of the business that you would need for growth. One of the things that's actually possible these days with compliments of the internet, and I really think that it's been possible in many businesses even before the internet existed. I mean, if you look at Marks and Spencer's, for example, it started off with a guy in a market store, and then he was able to grow the business right the way up until it became a PLC. And this didn't happen by spending all of the profit you make. It had to be reinvested. Well, let's have a look at the reinvestment model. And this is why, when you first start a business, you need money. Okay, the next question is most likely to be, how do I make more money? Well, if you haven't got a job yet, first thing is, go get a job. If you have got a job and it's very difficult to work within your means, then you need to go and get another job. But the good news is, you only need that other job whilst you're saving up for the money you need to open your business. The moment you've actually got that money together, you can go back to working one job. But you won't be able to give up that job, and that's what I'm going to explain to you a little bit more now. This is something they don't teach you at school, which perhaps they should, especially with the large number of individuals who are most definitely going to have to become freelancers. The world is changing. Let's say that you don't start off selling enough of whatever you sell in order to match the average salary. Let's say that you've got a second job and you've earned a couple of $1,000s in savings. And you're going to use that couple of $1,000s to buy something that will allow you to make your 30% after you've paid all of your costs, paid some tax. So you start off with 2,000, you buy something, you sell it, you pay your bills, you end up with 2,300. Now you could take that $300 and spend it, or next time you can buy 2,300. That 2,300 should become 2,600. These figures are not accurate. You can get your own calculator out. In actual fact, everything I say, you need to validate yourself. I'm a strong believer that you should never rely on mentors. If you look at a lot of videos these days, the first bit of advice they give is go get a mentor. Well, I don't actually agree with that, because a mentor, number one, if they're successful, they're not going to have time for you. They're not going to have time to think and worry about your business. And even if you find someone at the right age, in the right moment of their life, where they want to give back, they're going to be giving back in a much greater way, probably to do with philanthropy, rather than giving what they haven't much left of, which is their time. Also, you need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. And the best way of doing that is, yes, surround yourself with like-minded individuals, some of which will have a lot more experience than you. And that's to validate everything, because you're not going to be able to rely on other people to make decisions and always guide you. You really need to get used to making those decisions yourself. So get the calculator out, check everything I say, and see how this relates to you. Let me give you an example of why you should not rely on a mentor. I had a very good friend of mine who decided he wanted to run a small business selling second-hand cars, predominantly for teenagers buying their first car, 17-year-olds. And so he knew there was quite a demand for budget vehicles, and he knew they were quite easy to buy, and he also knew that if you buy something that's not perfect and you fix it up a little bit, then there's a little bit more money to be made. And he asked, how can I get some finance for this? I was very fortunate enough to understand that part of the business quite well all those years ago, and I was able to say, well, luckily we are both so young and happen to be born in the right country where you can actually get funding particularly cheap, and there's lots of support for younger people. So we put together a very nice business plan. We went to the Prince Youth Business Trust by Prince Charles, and they lent him the money, and he went out and bought some cars. And not only was he taking all of the profit out of the sales, very young man at the time, very easy mistake to make, but he had situations where it's coming up towards the end of the month and he needs to pay the mortgage. So he would knock the prices of a car down, he'd stick it in the newspaper, and he would sell the car, sometimes at cost, or sometimes even less than cost, just to get the money to pay the mortgage. So you can see what's coming. A few months later, maybe a couple of years later, I can't remember. I will ask him actually. He's quite successful now, very successful in fact. But there came a point when there was no money left for the business to function. Now, he brought this to my attention and actually said, well, what do we do? You know, I've got a mortgage to pay and I have got to still pay a monthly amount to pay this money back. Well, I explained to him that actually this organization isn't a bank. They're actually there to help support you. But for the mortgage, that is a bank, you're going to have to go and get a job, which he did. However, when it came to the Prince Youth Business Trust, because I said to him, don't worry, as long as you speak to them and you keep them informed, they will help you. They are not going to chase you for the money. They're not going to issue what's called a counter-court judgment and put a charge on your house or whatever it is that they do. You just need to keep them informed. Well, he didn't really keep them informed. He ignored them for quite a while. And I don't know who he was speaking to. Maybe it was his wife, maybe it was his mother. But when they kept saying, what are you doing about this money? He kept saying, oh, Darren said they won't go for the county court judgment. But Darren said. So on that basis, never rely on a mentor to make decisions that you need to make for yourself. Well, he learned from that, created quite a profitable business. I won't say who it is, just in case they're a bit shy. I won't say what they do, just in case you can work out who they are. But they are particularly successful. And I think one of the main reasons why they were so successful is because after getting your fingers burnt when you run out of money, you just make sure you live within your means. You don't run out of money. And you also learn the hard way that the only person who is responsible for your decisions, your actions, has to be you. So the first thing I'm doing is explaining to you the fundamentals of financing a business. The second thing I will do, I'll give you examples. Now these examples are quite interesting because they will validate and give credibility to what I'm saying. And it will also help you understand what it is I'm saying and how it will be applicable to you. If you open up a spreadsheet right now, and in the first column you put $2,500, and then throughout the next 36 columns you put a multiplier in there of 30%, you will see that not long after the second year and before the third year, compounding that 30% means that you will now have over $1 million worth of stock. And if you have $1 million worth of stock, it means you've had $1 million worth of sales. Whereas if you have the other business model where you are literally just working for yourself, it's like being employed, but you happen to be the boss, you will forever have the same amount. So how can you afford to live during that time you're not taking money out of the business and allowing the business to grow? That's right, you need another job. Now, of course, there comes a point when if you wanted to, you could look at finance. There are three types of business really in existence. You have the small mom and pop business. And the small mom and pop businesses are usually built by immigrants. There's a reason why most of the small corner shops in the UK happen to be ran by Indians. There's a reason why the corner shops in Mauritius happen to be ran by the Chinese. There's a reason why the corner shops in the country I happen to be in now are ran predominantly by Koreans. And the reason why they run these businesses is because they can earn as close to an average salary and have a good quality of life as they could if they worked for someone else. But at the same time, perhaps working for someone else is not as accessible to them as it would be for a local. So let's have a look at this then. Let's look at the corner shop as an example of this type of business. So you open the shop, and if you've ever seen one of these corner shops when they first open, they usually have quite a few bare shelves, and it's a starting point. If they're lucky, they've rented somewhere where they can usually live upstairs, and this will help with the insurance, because if you have someone living upstairs above a shop, the insurance premium is lower. So they work in the shop. Dad's probably got a second job somewhere, working during the day. The wife works in there in the morning. The kids help in the shop after school, give mum a break. Dad probably does the night shift, and everybody's happy. As they slowly make money, they reinvest that money in the shop, more stock. And slowly but surely, that shop will be full of stock. It will be full. What do they do next? They open a second shop. Then they open a third shop. And that's how the business grows. But in order for that to have been possible, they needed to have an income every month that allowed them to live on. Now, of course, if you look at the dot-com boom and everything else, that's a little bit different. You see, those type of businesses that end up floating on the stock market, they have been created by individuals who probably went to Stanford, and they learn all about investment, they learn all about computer science, and so by the time they open their business, they already know how to get seed funding. Seed funding is the money you get for a legal entity for proof of concept. You have a business plan, this is the type of business we want to create, this is how much it's going to cost for proof of concept, and they can even give the venture capitalist an exit strategy where once they have the proof of concept, someone else will buy them out. Or that VC funder will be quite happy to do first round funding, second round funding, so on and so forth, until eventually they go for an IPO, which is when they float the company on the stock market, and now they've got all of those shares, which means they're now worth millions. Well, if you are asking, how do I start a business with no money? Then you obviously don't know about that. And that's going to definitely be of a much higher level. If you are interested in that type of subject, however, you will be able to find videos on YouTube that already explain that. Now, although it's not as difficult as it sounds, you've just got to find a good idea. Why are people who already understand business, why are the bank managers of this world not leaving the bank and going and creating these wonderful businesses that they've seen their portfolio of clients creating over the years? Well, if you have had the opportunity of an education that teaches you everything you need to know in advance, the chances are you're going to be able to get a job, a very comfortable job, where you have a guaranteed salary that can provide you the lifestyle you want. And you're probably going to know, especially as a bank manager, how to create a residual income. You're going to know that you can buy properties and you can rent these properties. And if the deposit you put on the mortgage is high enough, plus your credit rating is going to be particularly high, the amount of interest you have to pay on that mortgage is going to be low enough for you to be able to start making a very good return. It's literally free money. If you, however, would like to learn more about how to create this residual income, how to create this type of passive income, I strongly suggest you read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's by a guy from, I think he's from Hawaii, who has been able to already explain this in great detail. But the fact of the matter is this: if you have a business, you need to know how much it needs to make, and you need to know how much stock you need to get off the ground, and you need to get that money in advance. If you're happy with earning the same amount of money every month and not necessarily growing a business, maybe it's a stopgap whilst you're studying, then go for it. Put the money down, take all of the profits out, and keep redoing it, keep repeating. every day until you're ready to move on. If you want to grow a bigger business, however, then you most definitely need to put money in. It can be as little as a couple of thousand to get you started, but you must never take that money out. You've got to let the business grow sufficiently so that the money coming in every month, the profit has got to be at least double what you're taking out in order to allow the business to continue to grow. One of the things that I actually did, not to help start a business, but to help keep a business going during the financial crisis. And I believe it's quite popular now. I've seen YouTube videos where people are now doing this and they've seriously taken it to the next level. I was doing this in 2007 when I believe the iPhone first came out. And the iPhone, as far as I'm concerned, is probably it has to be the first real smartphone in existence. I remember having like a little iPad tablet, like palm tablet, but it sure as hell wasn't a phone. But just to explain to you what I used to do, I used to go to the cattle market in Gloucester, where on a Sunday we would have a car boot sale. Quite interesting actually. The guy who used to run the car boot sale, his name was Malone. And this guy was particularly well known in the area for being quite wealthy. And I remember asking him one day, what do you do to make sure you don't pay too much tax? What do you do with your money? How are you supposed to structure a company? And he gave me some very, very interesting advice. He said, well, don't worry about it. Because at the end of the day, this is a nice problem to have. Most businesses don't fail because they didn't know how to pay the least amount of tax. They fail because they weren't making enough money or they were having cash flow issues. By the way, this is all about cash flow issues. I'm sure you've worked it out now that the money needs to be there in order for you to grow your business. And if you take the money out, that's when you have cash flow problems. If you think about it, if you've got a business that's making 30% and you take the money out to buy a car, then you've basically just lost 30% of that money. If you were to take a loan and pay 6%, then of course that money in the business is going to still provide you 24% profit even after paying the 6% back for the loan on the car. So you really have to be more clever when it comes to finance when you're running a business, instead of robbing Peter to pay Paul. Yeah, this is quite important. So one of the things I used to do was I went to this car boot sale and I would look at the stuff they had there. Then I would go home, and this is at the beginning when I didn't know the value of certain things. I would go home and I would check on eBay how much they were going for. I used to also buy bundled IT stuff. So when computer companies refurbish an office block and they change all of the IT switches and everything else, they would usually sell all of the switches and hubs in a bundle. So I would buy those bundles for like 30 or 40 bucks. I would split up the bundle into separate units. I would clean them. I would take fantastic photographs. I would write a really good description that not only explained what it was, but how it worked and what it was for. I would put them back on, and most of the time I would sell each item for more than I paid for the entire bundle. When I was happy that the stuff I saw in the car boot was worth more than I could sell them on eBay, I would go back, and if I was lucky, if I was quick enough, I would be able to buy quite a few items. I would stick them on eBay. I would sell them sometimes 400%, 500%, 600%, and everybody was happy. Now, today, this is going to be much easier. You would be able to go to a car boot sale. You would be able to go to a garage sale. You would even be able to go into certain shops that have offers. And you can check the price on eBay with your smartphone. And if the price is right, then of course you can buy, stick it on eBay, and you can make quite good money. I had situations where I was paying certain people's salary whilst my business was making a loss. I had situations where I had clients that were going bankrupt, but I still had to pay the salaries of the people who were working on their projects. And one of the ways I would pay their salary is just by doing this, buying and selling on eBay. It works particularly well. Well, of course, I'm now thousands of miles away. I'm in Kazakhstan, and I have to make an income that allows me to not take money out of my business. In my business, I have approximately 200 niche markets, and before I can sell in each niche market, I have to invest in putting particular packages together that are enticing enough to make these particular niche markets buy. Now, of course, I'm already in a few niche markets, but every time I have money in the business, I have to reinvest that money into the next niche market. Fortunately, with my business, I'm not buying and selling a physical product. So once I've actually set up what I need for each niche market, it brings in a residual income without me necessarily having to spend more money physically buying something. I keep selling the same thing. So it works particularly well for me. So how am I making money and how am I paying my bills during this time? Well, my particular way of doing it, and I'm sure this is something that you guys can do, I will make another video that explains this in greater detail, is I teach English online to students in China. Now, yes, you have to be qualified for sure. You need to get a TOEFL certificate. But if you really want to do it and you want to do it fast, you could probably take the course and complete it within a couple of weeks. I think I took about 6 months because I was doing it on the side whilst I was still doing other things. So it worked for me. And I think one of the main reasons why it is so easy to do is because of the infrastructure. It is not our job as an English teacher on these online platforms to actually teach the English. They've got local English teachers to do that. It is our job, that's why the course is set up the way it is, to give them practice on what they have just learned, to help them with their pronunciation and this type of thing. To give you an example of the type of money that brings in, if you were to do it the way I do it, it probably brings me in about $4,000 a month. The country I'm living in is so cheap, I probably get away with probably spending no more than $1,500 a month, and then whatever's left over, I usually reinvest into my business to speed things up. Yeah, that's pretty much how it works. And if you look on the internet, you will find other things. However, any business you get into is going to cost you money. And so every type of business you want to get into is going to cost you money. It's not going to make you enough money to live on when you first establish it. You're going to have money coming in on a monthly basis. So let's say then that you have a business that you know will succeed. It will flourish. It will make you this average of 30%. But you're not going to be able to work for somebody else whilst you're running the business. Let's say it's particularly time incentive, but you're sure this business idea is going to make you your millions. Well, it's at that point then that you have to calculate how much money do you need per month during that time, not living the life of luxury, but minimal expenses. And whatever that cost is per month, and for however long it will take before the business is big enough to be able to provide you a monthly income, whatever that amount is, you have to physically add that amount to the amount of money you need to set up the business. And that's when you need to actually find an investor. That's when you need to find some kind of finance. But here's the kicker. Most companies out there that deal with finance are not necessarily going to want to invest in an individual unless that individual has got a proven track record. And if you've got a proven track record, 9 times out of 10, you don't actually need to borrow the money from somebody else. So, you're going to have to learn to be very, very independent. You're going to have to learn to make the money yourself, and you're going to have to learn to wait. And that's really the main point. That's the main rule. Most people who do not open their own business in the first place do so because they are not prepared to wait and put the time in before it becomes successful. Maybe because A, they are living a life that's already too comfortable, like a bank manager, or B, they're just not the type of person who's prepared to put the work in. And you need to decide if you're one of those people who are prepared to put the work in, who is prepared to live a lower lifestyle, have a lower cost of living for a certain period of time whilst you're making this happen. Now, yes, you can be clever. If you are single, I was single at the time when I started this, you might decide if your business is something you can do remotely, you might decide to go and live in cheaper countries where you can still live like a king, and wait until your business is big enough to allow you to be able to go back home or to another westernized style country and have enough money coming in per month to have the same quality of life as you can in the cheaper countries. That's basically what I'm doing. But if not, just remember that it's probably going to take about 3 years, I'm serious, 3 years, before you're going to have the type of business that you can be proud of. So in answer to the question, no, you cannot set up a business without money. And as soon as you work out how much money you need, the sooner you can start earning it, and the sooner you can start. Well, I hope that was of use to you. Thank you for listening.